A poor showing in the polls for Sinn Féin in the Republic's local and European elections. Good evening, I'm Paul Clark. This is View from Stormont. On tonight's programme, our political editor Tracy McGee reports from the RDS in Dublin on the latest developments in the Republic's local and European election counts. We begin our series of interviews with the party leaders ahead of the July the 4th general election. Tonight you'll hear from the SDLP leader Colm Eastwood, Alliance leader Naomi Long and the Ulster Unionist leader Doug Beattie. Analysing what they'll have to say, tonight's commentators Suzanne Breen and Dr. Claire Rice. Counting will continue tomorrow in the Irish elections. Nearly all of the 950 council positions have been filled, but the results in the European elections have been slow in coming through. Our political editor, Tracy McGee, has been at the count all weekend. A short time ago, I spoke to her at the RDS in Dublin. Tracy, what's the very latest?
Well, Paul, I can tell you in the last hour, Ireland has elected its first member for the European Parliament. Fine Gael's Sean Kelly has been elected in the Ireland South constituency. He's the only one confirmed. You might be able to see behind me, they're starting to wind down here at the RDS. No one has been elected, but it is likely at this stage that Fianna Fáil's Barry Andrews will top the poll, with Fine Gael's Regina Doherty also getting over the line. Talking to Sinn Féin representatives, they're also hopeful that their candidate Lynn Boylan will also take a seat. It's not clear who will take the fourth seat. And in the Midlands southwest or northwest constituency, no count as yet. It's not clear at this point who will get over the line. It's thought the independent Luke Ming Flanagan will top the poll, but it does look as if the two Sinn Féin candidates, Chris McManus and maybe the better known Michelle Gildernew for our audience, will not make the cut. I can tell you that tomorrow counters will be back here in Dublin. This count is expected to wind up tomorrow. The other two could go as far as Thursday.
Now, it seems the story here is the fact that the predicted support for Sinn Féin just did not materialise.
That's exactly the case, Paul. It is important to say that Sinn Féin's vote has actually increased, albeit modestly. They got about 9% of the vote back in 2019. They have managed just under 12% this time around in the local government elections. But as you say, that is far short of what they were expected to do in the polls. Only a few months ago, the party was heading around the mid 30% in any polls that were being called. Going into this election, that had dropped down to maybe the 20s. But in this election, it appears that support for the party has absolutely cratered. And for that reason, the Sinn Féin representatives around here, they're looking quite downbeat. Mary Lou MacDonald arrived here yesterday looking really very forlorn. Now, she was sounding a bit more defiant today, but clearly the party has some tough questions to ask itself, and they are promising a review of why things have gone wrong.
Is it the case that Sinn Féin's loss was the government party's gain?
No, that wasn't the case, Paul. The government parties did drop some of their vote, not anything that would concern them, but in fact the predicted support for Sinn Féin appears to have gone to independent candidates. In fact, independents have got around 28.5% of the vote in the local government elections. If they were a cohesive party, they would be the biggest party in Ireland this evening. As it is, candidates right across the spectrum have been elected in all parts of Ireland.
Well, there's been no sign of a massive shift to the right.
No, and that had been not predicted, almost feared, I think, by some, that there would be this lurch to the right. Now, a handful of right candidates, hard right candidates, anti-immigrant voices were elected, but really they were just a handful. Certainly nowhere near what we have seen in countries like Germany or France. And I have to say there has been also an increase in migrant candidates in the Irish elections. It's thought maybe 17 or 18 of them may be elected. So the story from Ireland in the European elections, at least, is that the centre ground has held. And certainly in terms of the local government elections, while there have been a lot of independent candidates, it has been from across the spectrum.
So how have the government parties fared in these elections so far?
Well, again, in the council elections, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are really neck and neck. They are sitting in and around 23%. In fact, they have been really in a straight shootout in terms of who exactly is going to take the top spot. Now, if you had said to those parties going into this election that would be the outcome, they would absolutely have taken your arm off. So for them, while they have dropped down a little, just a few percentage points, it is for them a real shot in the arm. And that's why I think you saw the Taoiseach and the Fianna Fáil leader, Micheál Martin, sounding very upbeat when they have come here to the count.
And there are questions now about whether there'll be an early general election.
Absolutely, Paul, because there has to be the calculation within the government parties that Sinn Féin aren't looking too good. They have not connected with the electorate in the way that it had been promised, and certainly the party is in a situation where they're in flux and they're trying to find their feet, if you like. It is a good opportunity for any party hoping to go to the electorate and to convince them of giving them another go in government. Now, when you talk to Simon Harris and Micheál Martin, they say, look, we have said that we are going to stay the course, if you like, to the deadline for the election, which is March 2025. But if the figures continue as we have been expecting and how it looks like they're going to perform in the European elections, you'd have to say to yourself, the logic for an early election will become pretty irresistible.
Tracy McGee, thank you. Now, tonight we begin our series of interviews with party leaders. First up is the SDLP's Colm Eastwood. At the last Westminster election in December 2019, his party won 2 seats. I spoke to Colm Eastwood earlier. In this election, why should people vote for the SDLP?
Well, I think with the SDLP, people know you get MPs who are hard-working, who turn up, actually, go to Westminster. We're not abstentionists. And when you think about what's happening in the polls across the water, hopefully we're going to see the back of this Tory government after 14 very long, brutal years of them, frankly, wrecking the place. Hopefully we're now going to have a Labour government, and whilst we don't agree with everything Keir Starmer does, we have influence there because they're our sister party.
Well, I want to draw you on that a little bit later, but first of all, you have 2 MPs. What difference, if any, have you made?
Well, remember between 2017 and 2019, when the only real voice in Westminster was the DUP, because we'd lost our seats. That was during the tumultuous Brexit years. After that, Claire Hanna and myself got elected with big mandates. We spoke up for the people of Northern Ireland. We got a commitment from the Labour Party to get rid of the Legacy Act. We were the voice for common sense on Brexit, and we were able to deliver quite a lot for our own constituencies. But not having our voice there was the real problem during that chaos that we had around Brexit. It took 4.5 years to get us back to a sensible situation around all of that, but that needed the voices of people here heard on the green benches.
But are you not a voice in the wilderness when it comes to the big issues?
No, not at all. I think we speak, we punch way above our weight. And I remember what it was like when we didn't have a voice. People want a voice back there. And of course, if we have a Labour government, yes, it's always better to have a Labour government than a Tory government, but they need somebody there with influence with them, and we have a lot of influence with them, holding their feet to the fire to deliver for Northern Ireland.
Well, it begs this question. The SDLP has been very clear on Brexit. How will you bring your influence to bear on Labour? Because they're not going to go back in.
Well, I think what you'll see actually will be a moving closer to the European Union, a mending of relationships, and a mending hopefully of relationships with the Dublin government, because that was totally destroyed because of Brexit and because of the lies that the Tory Prime Ministers have made. So I think what you really will see now is a mending of that relationship, and that is the core thing that builds our peace process, is the two governments in London and Dublin working together. I think we can be a bridge for a lot of that, because we've significant influence in Dublin, and we've seen a very good result for the government parties in Dublin over the last couple of days. We've significant influence there and significant influence with Keir Starmer and the Labour Party.
So how, in that case, would you hold their feet to the fire in that sense, in terms of, for example, rejoining the European Union?
Well, look, we would love them to rejoin the European Union. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But what can happen is a closer relationship, particularly around the economic relationship with the European Union. I think you will see Labour moving in that direction over a period of time. I hope they do. Our voice on behalf of the people of Northern Ireland who aren't the DUP will be heard loud and clear. And if we weren't there, there'd be nobody speaking up for that cohort of the population.
Should Labour form the next government, what would you hope to get for Northern Ireland?
Well, the first thing has to happen is the Legacy Act, the cruel Legacy Act, needs to be scrapped. We get that commitment from Keir Starmer, and I think he will deliver on that. Then we need to look at how the Northern Ireland Executive is actually funded. We've been saying for 2 decades that it needs to be funded on the basis of need, and we're now seeing what has happened as a result of both the DUP and Sinn Féin pulling the government down for nearly 5 years, then COVID. Now our health service is collapsing. It needs more money.
So how quickly do you see change happening, for example, with regard to health and also with regard to the legacy legislation?
Well, I think the legacy legislation can be scrapped on day one. The issue with the finances really is that the Tory party have destroyed the finances along with the economy. So that will be a longer process. But the principle of ensuring that the executive is funded on the basis of need, in other words, what normal people, ordinary people and families need most, that should be how it's funded, and I will be working very closely with the Labour Party to ensure that happens. People can't get access to the health service, therefore they're having to go private. You know, this is ordinary people who are working hard, having to go private for simple operations. That is a result of mismanagement at Stormont, but also of the funds being stripped of public services.
What would replace the legacy legislation, do you believe?
Well, I, for a long time, have said that there has to be an openness from both the British government in particular, also the Irish government and paramilitary organisations. That will not happen though if you take away the judicial process. We will not get to the truth, as we have found out over the last 2.5 decades. We won't get to the truth if we just ask the IRA or the British government nicely to give us that truth. They have to be held to account. There has to be a judicial investigatory process that looks into all of these things. And remember, many families didn't even see a police officer after their loved one was murdered. They're the people who we have left behind as the rest of us have moved on, and I just don't think it's okay.
What would success look like for the SDLP in this election?
I think I'm doing this long enough now, Paul, not to put numbers on anything other than the fact that we have two, I think, very hard-working MPs who represent their constituents well and have made sure the voice of everybody but the DUP has been heard in Parliament. I think retaining those 2 seats after we lost all of our seats in 2017 would be a big victory.
Well, you're standing in every constituency in this election, but you will not win in every constituency.
Well, I don't think no party will win in every constituency, and our resources will obviously be, are being focused on 2 or 3 constituencies where we're competitive. I think that's what a lot of parties will do. But there's lots of places across the north where we have to build back, and this is the beginning of that process. But I think we will do well in the 2 constituencies where we hold, and actually there may be 1 or 2 others where we will be competitive as well, like places like Southdown.
What would you want to see from a new government whenever it comes to dealing with issues like the cost of living, which you're very exercised about?
Well, I think first and foremost we have to understand that the Tories have wrecked the place by starving public institutions of funds, by starving the National Health Service and the education system, and our devolved governments of funds. That needs to be corrected because people have had such a raw deal. The problem is though, the reason our mortgages are so high, the reason our insurance is so high is because Liz Truss really destroyed the economy in nearly about a week.
Well, world events have also featured there, surely.
Yeah, but it didn't help that we had an uber right-wing Prime Minister and Chancellor who were prepared to throw basic economic theory out the window to destroy everything in their wake. Hopefully we'll be moving out of that, but it's going to take a lot of work.
So what would you be urging the government, any new government, to do in that case?
Well, I think we have to understand that lots of people are struggling, so we have to put public services back on a better footing financially.
Raising
taxes?
Also have to be.
I don't think there are going to be taxes raised, particularly on working people, because people have got it tight enough. I know no matter how much you're making now, it's still very difficult to make ends meet. Insurance is through the roof, and one of the first things they should be doing is tackling those insurance companies, whether it's house insurance, car insurance, who are ripping people off. Our mortgages are through the roof. Hopefully those interest rates will begin to come down in August.
Okay. I want to ask you this question. There is evidence of disunity within the SDLP. For example, how you dealt with Justin McNulty, the resignation of 2 councillors in Derry. Why should people trust you when the party doesn't appear to be speaking with one voice?
Well, I think we are. Look, every political party has internal difficulties at times. I'd love to see Justin back in the team. I think we will see Justin back in the team, hopefully sooner rather than later. We had a difficulty around one thing there that I think can be resolved. In terms of Derry, look, it was difficult. It was a new process. It wasn't communicated very well.
You're a party in electoral decline. If you lose in this election, is the SDLP finished?
I don't know how many election interviews I've done where people tell me the SDLP is finished.
No, I'm asking the question here. I'm not giving the answer.
We absolutely are not. And I think what the election we had over the last couple of days, the 26 counties, shows actually is if people got off Twitter for 5 minutes and spoke to ordinary people like I've been doing and Claire's been doing and our candidates across the north have been doing, people want representation at Westminster.
In the few seconds remaining, what will you deliver for Northern Ireland should you get elected in the next part? Hello again. Next up in our party leader interviews, Naomi Long, leader of the Alliance Party. At the last election, the party took 1 seat. I spoke to Naomi Long earlier. Why should people vote Alliance in this election?
Well, I think people have an opportunity to send people to Westminster who are positive about the future, who want to do constructive things around trying to make Northern Ireland a better place to live. And I think Alliance are offering people that positivity, that progressive policy, and also, I think, a good vision for how we would want to make things more stable in Northern Ireland. We know the challenges that the Executive and Assembly face. We have solutions that we want to go and press at Westminster, whether that's in terms of our finances and the need for those to be sustainable, or whether that's in terms of reform of our institutions. So I think there are lots of reasons, but not least of all because we are standing for something that other parties are not, and that is the building of a united community and a shared future here in Northern Ireland. You
took a long time to announce your candidacy in East Belfast. Is your heart in it?
My heart is very much in it. My heart is also very much in the Department of Justice, which was why it was such a difficult decision. It was easy for me to stand for election at a point where the institutions were collapsed, and that made perfect sense. But I wanted to be able to take adequate time to reflect on where I was best placed, both to serve my constituents of East Belfast, but also to serve the party and to serve Northern Ireland. And in the end, I believed that it was the right decision for me to stand for Westminster.
You remain as Justice Minister.
I do.
Are you hedging your bets here?
I'm not hedging my bets. I am very much committed to the Department of Justice, and what I want to avoid doing is create unnecessary disruption to the department. If I should be fortunate enough to be elected to Westminster, we will have the summer to bed in a new Alliance Justice Minister. If I'm not fortunate enough to be elected to Westminster, I will be able to continue to deliver the programme of work that I've already set in train.
And would you not be making a greater difference as Justice Minister in Northern Ireland rather than sitting on the green benches in London?
Well, that's something that I weighed up when I made the decision, and I believe that the main challenges that face the Northern Ireland Assembly and the Executive right now are challenges that need to be addressed by Westminster, because first of all, we need a better funding settlement for Northern Ireland. I believe I can articulate very directly in Westminster why that's necessary and what it should look like. We also need reform of our institutions so that no party can ever collapse them again, and that's a conversation that will be led by the two governments in London and Dublin, whilst the rest of the parties will have a contribution to make. That leadership has to come from elsewhere. And I believe that we have a really strong and progressive argument for why we need to do that reform. So I believe that there is a job of work to do in Westminster, and I want to join Stephen Farry and others in doing that.
Why did the party not consider another candidate in East Belfast?
Well, we did consider other candidates in East Belfast, but my constituents and indeed the other candidates who were under consideration were very keen that I would go ahead if I was willing to do so. At the end of the day, in any election, people will run the candidate they feel has the highest profile. As party leader, I was going to be intimately involved in this election anyway, whether I was a candidate or whether I was simply party leader. So from that perspective, it made sense for me to lead from the front, to put my name on the ballot paper and be willing to stand up for what we're running for in this campaign.
Last week you withdrew from a conference organised by Ireland's Future, which is campaigning for a united Ireland. Why did you pull out?
Well, it's as simple as this. In terms of the timing of this, it's very unfortunate. I was really keen to be part of that conversation. I'd agreed to go along months before this election was called. But when the election was called, my time as leader of the party is at a premium, and my availability on that particular Saturday, it just isn't there anymore. There's a direct clash with another event that I have to service. But the party is still engaged in that event, and Nuala McAllister is attending on my behalf. And I think both as a former Lord Mayor of Belfast, which I also was, and as the current whip for the Assembly, I think she's well placed to articulate Alliance's point of view at that conference.
Was it not about appealing to soft unionists?
Well, look, we want to appeal to soft unionists, soft nationalists, strong unionists, and those who are neither. That's the appeal of Alliance, and that's what we want to do. So it isn't about that, and for many of our constituents, it wouldn't be about that. It will have disappointed some people. I'm disappointed that I'm not able to be there, but time pressures are a reality, I think, for us all in an election, and I have to prioritise my time carefully.
And you're still agnostic on the union?
We remain in the same position we have always been. We want Northern Ireland to be a united place. We want Northern Ireland to be a successful place.
Within the United Kingdom?
And my focus is on delivering that, because we can't have a truly united kingdom or a truly united Ireland if the people of Northern Ireland remain divided. So that is my priority. It remains the party's priority. And if and when there is a decision to be taken about our long-term constitutional future, Alliance will deal with that head on.
Until then, people are still going to ask you the question on the doorsteps. Where do you stand on the union?
Well, oddly, they don't. They ask me it in television studios, but it's very rare for them to ask me it on the doorsteps, because I think the public understand where Alliance is when it comes to United Ireland and the constitutional question. What they want from us are policies that will make a difference to their everyday lives. Few people are awake early in the morning, lying in a pool of sweat, worried about what the future constitutional position of Northern Ireland is. A lot of them are worried about what's going to happen to the health service, to the police service, to our public services more generally.
Well, indeed, and
those are issues that we want to address.
So where do you stand on those issues?
And we stand on those issues that we believe that, first of all, we need to have sensible investment in our public services. We've been very clear that the deal that Northern Ireland currently has in terms of the financial framework is not adequate. The 3.3 billion that we got from the government when we returned to government was good, but it was not enough, and I was very clear about that at the time. We believe that the fiscal arrangements that are in place need reform, but we also believe that the fiscal rules in the UK as a whole need to be reformed. Many of the challenges that the UK faces, along with the rest of the globe, are things that are long term. They are things like climate change, infrastructure. Those don't happen in 5-year cycles. Those happen over 20 and 30 years. And so we need to change the fiscal rules so that Northern Ireland is able to invest in our future and delivering a better and more positive outcome for our people.
But we're dependent on all of that money coming from London. It all stems from London. How will you address, for example, the cost of living crisis and inflation?
Well, not all of it comes from London, though London has a key point to play. But I also believe that we have to be fiscally responsible in Northern Ireland. And Alliance has never backed away from that challenge. So if you look at the Department of Justice, for example, which we have held for some time, a lot of our services are based on cost recovery. So we don't rely always on investment from government sources. We expect cost recovery, we expect reform. There are also changes we can make. Remember that there are huge costs of division that lie within our society because of its divided nature. If we were to tackle those issues, for example, tax avoidance and evasion at a UK level, we would have more money to invest in key public services, and that's important for the people we represent.
So what do you believe you can deliver for the people of Northern Ireland in the next Parliament?
Well, we will be producing our manifesto. It will be launched on the 20th of this month, and it will go into quite a lot of detail of the sort of measures that we will be proposing and we will be supporting. But I can only look to what I was able to do in the 5 years I was previously in Westminster. We were able to change the law around transparency of political party finances. We were able to change the law on double jobbing so that people can no longer hold a Westminster seat and sit in the Assembly. Stephen Farry has made huge progress in terms of the work that he has been doing over the last 5 years. And with an increased team, I believe that more MPs in Westminster will deliver more for people in Northern Ireland, and that's our objective.
Given that there may be, or may not be, but given that there may be a Labour government, what are relationships like between Alliance and Labour?
We have a very constructive relationship. The current Shadow Secretary of State, Hilary Benn, is somebody who I rate. I think he's very engaged, very aware of the challenges that Northern Ireland faces. And we have a good relationship with Keir Starmer and indeed with the potential future Secretary of State when it comes to Treasury. But what we need to do is ensure not only that we have good relationships, but that we have strong and compelling arguments. And that's what Alliance is best at delivering. We have strong policies. We have strong ideas about how we can improve Northern Ireland, but also how that will improve our relationship with other places.
So what pressure will you be able to bring to bear, for example, on issues like legacy legislation?
Well, first of all, I think we've already brought significant pressure to bear when it comes to legacy legislation, in that the Westminster incoming government, potentially in Labour, have said that they intend to repeal that legislation. So I think it's about us trying to work with them to find an alternative to that legislation, as opposed to having to convince them that that legislation is in and of itself wrong. I think we've won that argument. I think it's also important, though, that we look to wider issues that Labour will also have choices about. Are they going to invest in tackling climate change? Are they going to invest in long-term infrastructure projects? And what will be the consequences for Northern Ireland if they do? And crucially for us, are they going to find closer and better working relationships with the Irish government and with the European Union more widely?
Earlier I was asking you about Alliance and its position on the Union. What about Alliance and its position on a united Ireland?
Well, it's exactly the same. We're not there to advocate for it, but we are there to engage in the conversation. It's one of the reasons why we've agreed to be part of the Ireland's Future event, because whatever is going to shape this place where we live and that we call home, Alliance is going to be part of that conversation. We're currently part of that conversation without prejudice to what the outcome will be, but it's important that we have a stake in our future.
A quick question and 10 seconds to answer. What would success look like for Alliance?
Success for Alliance, I think, would look like at least one MP in Stephen Farry returned and potentially more Alliance MPs beside him.
Naomi Long, thank you.
Thank you.
And our commentators are still here. Suzanne Breen, it's decision time, is it not, for Naomi Long? She must decide, does her political future lie in London or Stormont?
I think if it was up to Naomi Long herself, she would be staying on as Justice Minister. But this is a case of party before self. Alliance is an incredibly strong team in terms of talent at Stormont, and there's no shortage of MLAs who could become Justice Minister. You know, I think probably Paula Bradshaw would be favourite, Nuala McAllister would be up for it too. But there is only one Alliance candidate that can win East Belfast, and that is Naomi Long. This is a chance for Alliance, as it sees it, not just to take out the DUP MP Gavin Robinson, but he's now party leader, to take out the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party. And I think if she didn't stand and something happened that Stephen Farry lost his seat, then there may be some criticism in the party that she didn't put herself forward. It would be, you could have won that seat, and I think she is very much aware of that.
Claire, are we the only people who ask Alliance about the constitutional situation?
I'm going to say no, because I've been part of an academic team for the last few years actually researching the Alliance Party, and that has been one of the things we've been pecking their heads about pretty consistently during that time. And interestingly, what we found in our research actually was that the constitutional question doesn't feature as a top priority issue or even a second priority issue for the membership of the party. So it is very much, I suppose, more the optics of what it would look like for East Belfast in terms of representation. Would it be the optics of having a unionist representing East Belfast as opposed to Alliance that doesn't really have a position on the constitutional question that would make the party seem more or less favourable to voters? I think that's more the territory that we're in. But certainly the constitutional question is one that is plaguing the party left, right and centre. But they're very resolute on this idea that it'll be as and when a Board of Poll is called that they will reach a decision decision at that point in time. So we'll have to wait and see.
Suzanne, Alliance's sister party in Westminster would be the Lib Dems, but she was speaking very fondly there of the relationship she would like to be able to foster with Labour.
She was indeed, and obviously the SDLP is the Labour Party's sister party, but I think that Naomi Long and any other Alliance MPs that are returned to Westminster, I think they'll get on really well with Keir Starmer and with Hilary Benn. Neither men are that sympathetic to Irish nationalism. I think they are, pro-union, moderate, and I think it'll be a dream relationship. Between Alliance.
We'll talk to you further in the next part of the programme, because still to come, the Ulster Unionist leader, Doug Beattie. Do stay with us. Hello again, now to the third and final party leader on tonight's programme. It's the turn of the Ulster Unionists, Doug Beattie. The party last won 2 Westminster seats in 2017, but none in the 2019 election. I spoke to Doug Beattie earlier. Why vote Ulster Unionist in this election?
Well, I think for better representation, Paul, because what we've seen over the last number of years is our MPs sitting in Westminster, and they have not been listened to. They have not represented us fully, and they have not galvanised the people to understand the issues that
the DUP would argue that differently.
Well, of course they will, but I'm making...
And there are other MPs as well.
Yes, and I'm making the case for what I'm seeing, and I see all the time debates about Northern Ireland to absolutely empty chambers in Westminster, and what we can do is galvanise people to understand better the problems we face here in Northern Ireland, the problems that people face here in Northern Ireland, and we can do that by really focusing on the issues that affect the people here.
But you've seen the chamber, I've seen the chamber, there aren't that many MPs in there.
No, they're not, and that's the whole point. They're not there because they don't want to hear, they don't want to listen. But I feel that we've got people who can go to Westminster and galvanise us and make them want to hear and make them want to listen.
How will you do that? How will you do that?
Well, look, sometimes it's about building relationships, and I've put forward a raft of candidates who understand how to build relationships to make sure that people understand that we can work with them. So that's how you always do things in places like Westminster. Look, there's only 18 MPs and not all of them sit there. So we have to always understand where we really sit in the grand scheme of things. But, having people who are energised, who can engage with other political parties and build those relationships, that's how you make your influence heard.
Was it the cleverest of moves to put Robin Swan into health and then pull him out again?
Look, I think people sometimes forget where we came from on this, Paul. I mean, we were thrown into the executive getting back up and running again. We didn't get any run into this. We didn't know. And I ended up with health. We didn't know we were going to get health. And I needed to hit the ground running. I'd already announced Robin Swan was going to be our candidate. So I needed to hit the ground running.
But the expectation was that the election would come later rather than sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. And therefore, Robin Swan was put in, hit the ground running. And his aim was to get us through the budget, to get us through the programme for government, and then step down to allow somebody else to go in to take it forward.
But in truth,
the election was brought forward sooner than we thought.
In truth, he has counted his tenure as health minister in weeks.
Yes, it certainly wasn't as long as we'd wanted to be. I mean, Robin would have been the health minister well into July, August, September. October had election not been called, but we'd already got Mike Nesbitt shadowing him as his APS. So Mike knew what the brief was, and it was a seamless transition. And that's just things that were forced on us.
But does this confusion not raise questions about your strategy here?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's pretty sensible to say that we wanted to hit the health portfolio running. Robin knew the relationships, he knew the problems. He didn't have to start reading into a brief, he already knew it. So that's what we did. On the understanding is that would give somebody, the new minister, Mike Nesbitt in this case here, time to understand and learn in slow time. We pretty much did that, but the election was called earlier than what we expected.
So let's look at the election itself now. Your presence in certain constituencies could gift seats to non-unionists.
I kind of don't really agree that that's the case. We will stand in 17 constituencies, and the people who will vote for Ulster Unionists are Ulster Unionist Party voters, people who look at us and see us as a more moderate voice of unionism, and they will come to us. If we weren't standing, that doesn't mean they would go to other unionists. We could lose these people from unionist voting pool completely. So it's important that we stand. This argument that, you know, we're standing, we're splitting a vote, just doesn't wash. The people who vote for the Ulster Unionist Party will vote for the Ulster Unionist Party, or they'll be lost to somebody else somewhere else.
The DUP has reset its position on the Windsor framework. Where does the Ulster Unionist Party stand?
We haven't changed our position since the 2nd of October 2019. That's when the Northern Ireland Protocol was birthed. That's when the DUP said it was a serious and sensible proposal, and we told them it was a dangerous proposal. Nothing has changed for us since then. We have continued to work to get rid of the protocol. We do not and will never support an Irish Sea border, and we've been working to get rid of that. And we think we can do that. It's not a short-term thing, and it's a geopolitical issue that we have to deal with here, but we think we can get rid of it.
Well, let me ask you in that case, what case would you be making to a new government regarding the Irish Sea border?
Well, it's the same argument we've been making since 2019 as well. Paul, this is why we haven't changed our tack, and that needs to be an SPS deal, a bespoke SPS deal between the United Kingdom and the European Union. That will get rid of the vast majority of any checks we have in any Irish Sea border. We also believe that the live data sharing that we have between Great Britain and Northern Ireland could actually be a model for live data sharing between the whole of the United Kingdom and the whole of the European Union. And Northern Ireland could be the hub for that. Now, that's not me saying that, that's coming from the Federation of Small Businesses, and these are ways that we can eliminate this.
What makes you think that a future government would listen to you in a way that it hasn't listened to unionists in the past?
Well, they are listening already, and we know that there will be a vote later this year on Articles 5 to 10 of the protocol, and if there's not cross-community consent on that, there will be a review of that. So that's important that we make our case then. But in 2025, there is another review of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, and that's when whatever government it's going to be, and I believe it'll be a Labour government, but if it's Labour or Conservative, I think both will move closer towards Europe. I think that's where they will look to make the changes that we have been recommending since 2019.
Well, let me ask you then, what would you want a new government of whatever shape to prioritise for Northern Ireland?
Look, I think there's two things I would like any new government to prioritise, and that is cohesion within the whole of the United Kingdom. We've lost cohesion within this kingdom, and we need to get that back. And I'm a whole United Kingdom unionist, and I want to see that cohesion between the four nations. But specifically, being an Ulster Unionist Party leader and the Ulster Unionist Party, we want to see them look to us and see how they can bring us in more to this union, particularly around, for example, defence. I mean, Northern Ireland plays a pivotal part in the defence structure of the United Kingdom. And I think the government of the day, whichever the government that is going to be...
What would you want the government to do on cost of living, for example, which affects every single one of us?
Well, absolutely. But if they're going to help us with the cost of living crisis, we also have to help ourselves, and that is growing our economy. So the UK government has to give us stability. We need to grow our economy. It means foreign direct investment, but it also means small, medium and micro businesses being able to reach out beyond these shores, beyond the shores of the United Kingdom, and into Europe and North America. And the UK government, we're hoping, will help us be able to achieve that.
What sets you apart from other unionist parties in this election?
Look, I've said this before, that we're moderate, but we have a very clear vision. We have a very clear vision for the future, and that is a united community, but within the confines of the United Kingdom. Now, other parties will have wanting a united community within the confines of a united Ireland. That's not my vision, that'll be theirs. But our vision is long-term, and that is working on the people and prosperity and public services and peace. That's what we want to achieve, working with our people here, all of our people here in Northern Ireland.
What pressure could you bring on a future government to spend more money on the likes of health, education, infrastructure in Northern Ireland?
Look, we've stood, and I've got to say this and be honest, we've stood with other political parties right across the board and made our argument for the funding for Northern Ireland. We have to help ourselves as well, but we need to be absolutely clear. We've been underfunded as a region of the United Kingdom for many years, and we need to go out and fight our case on this, that we have been underfunded. We've been funded below need. So we need to make that case.
But that hasn't changed.
No, it hasn't changed, and we need to make a change. And that goes back to the very start and the first question you made, Paul, about what would be different with us in Westminster, and that's an effective voice. We've had voices, you're absolutely right, but they haven't been effective, because if they had been effective, the issues we face, we wouldn't be still facing them now.
What does success look like for the Ulster Unionists post this election?
Well, I'm ambitious for the Ulster Unionist Party, Paul. So the first thing I would say is getting back on the green benches of Westminster is success. But getting one back isn't enough for me. Getting two back would be great. Getting three or getting four, I think would be exceptional. And I think we're in the hunt for five. That doesn't mean we'll win five, but we're in the hunt for five. And I'm ambitious, so we're pushing every lever we possibly can.
And in the few seconds remaining, what happens if the Ulster Unionists don't return with any seats?
Yes, well, we find ourselves in an extremely difficult position. Since I became the party leader, we've been in a single election cycle. That's the Assembly election, the local council election, and now the Westminster election. And if we come at the end of that without success, then look, that is a degree of failure. We have to recalibrate ourselves and move to the next election cycle. If that's with me, then that'll be up to my membership to decide.
Doug Beattie, thank you.
Thank you.
And just a minor correction there. The Ulster Unionists last won 2 seats for Westminster in 2015, and they lost them both in 2017. So, Claire, what's the difference between the DUP and the Ulster Unionists?
Oh, a fine slither by the sounds of it. Effectively, it's the way that the party is trying to present its views. What we saw in 2019 was that there was a move to the extremes of the political spectrum in Northern Ireland in terms of Westminster representation in response to the whole Brexit situation. That's why the UUP was wiped out, same the way the SDLP previously suffered as well within that tumultuous period of the whole Brexit situation. And effectively, where the UUP sits now, it's very difficult to, I suppose, get a more novel or a unique way of presenting the Brexit issues there in such a way that they can distinguish themselves from the DUP in terms of that particular issue. This is where the difficulty is as well, because Doug Beattie there was talking about the idea that success of the party wouldn't just be the idea of one or two MPs being returned. We heard about 2 the last time that they held MPs, but he's naming numbers up as far as 5. That, in terms of the reputation of the party, in the longer term could end up being even more damaging, because if the party is setting expectations above and beyond what might otherwise be expected for the party to achieve, and they don't achieve that, then that's a higher hill to have to try and climb down from.
Suzanne, the Ulster Unionists need a win here, don't they?
They do. Doug Beattie has been leader now 3 years. The party hasn't seen electoral success under him, and I think it's time really now to see the colour of the money. I agree with Claire. I do not know why Doug set the bar so high. The party will be lucky to get 1 seat, but I don't think it is in the hunt for 5. That is very, very optimistic, but it does have to have MPs elected in this election. The DUP has had a terrible time, and if the UUP, its rival, cannot take advantage when the DUP is so weak, it never will.
And if the Ulster Unionists do get an MP here, they'll have the work cut out for them.
Well, most certainly, not least because there'll be a lone voice effectively going for Northern Ireland, assuming it would be one. More than likely, we would expect that would be Robin Swan. From what we're seeing in polling, we would expect that he is the closest runner in contention to be elected as an MP for the party. But regardless, it's a very difficult situation for the party, because not only are they going to be navigating a Westminster terrain going forward, but there's also everything that was spoken about in the interview there with regards to the health portfolio, the profile of that, the issues with health in Northern Ireland, and there'll almost be an expectation, if it is Robin Swan, that because he held that role, he'll be able to exercise some new levers somehow, and that just won't be the case in reality.
Dr. Claire Rice and Suzanne Breen, thank you both very much indeed. Our series of interviews with senior figures from the parties continues next week, when you will hear from the DUP and Sinn Féin. And in later programmes, we'll be speaking to the other parties. You'll find a full list of candidates standing in all of Northern Ireland's 18 constituencies on our website. Just search UTV News. And that's View from Stormont this Monday night. Don't forget you can keep up to date with the programme in audio form. Just go to our website or search UTV Podcast. You'll also find us on ITVX. We're back again next Monday. Until then, from all of us on the programme, thank you for watching, good night and sleep well.